December 1982, Belfast, Masefield Leisure Centre. Bono stands in front of 3,000 people in the heart of Northern Ireland. He's about to perform a song called Sunday Bloody Sunday, a song about the most traumatic date in modern Irish history, a song that could be heard as glorifying violence by some, condemned as anti-IRA by others, a song that, in this room, in this city torn apart by decades of sectarian bloodshed, could go catastrophically wrong. Before he begins, he makes a promise. "This is a new song," he tells the crowd. "If you don't like it, we'll never play it again." The band launches into the military drum pattern. The Edge's guitar cuts through like a warning, and for the next 4 minutes, U2 places everything they've built on the line. This was not how a struggling band usually survived. This was how one chose to gamble. By the autumn of 1982, U2 had run out of time. Their debut, Boy, in 1980, had earned critical praise and modest sales. Raw, searching, emotionally open. It established them as a post-punk band with potential. Then came October in 1981. Stranger, more experimental, dominated by spiritual themes that confused listeners and failed to build momentum. Critics were divided, sales plateaued, radio ignored the singles. Worse still, the aftermath was corrosive. The band felt Island Records wasn't supporting them financially or promotionally. There was frustration, deflation, doubt. The Edge later recalled the mood. Island was questioning whether to keep them. They'd made a step backward. For a band with 2 albums and dwindling attention, this was existential pressure. But there was something else at work. Something that had nothing to do with commerce. In 1982, Bono looked at the world and saw nothing but conflict. The Falklands War, the Middle East, South Africa, Poland under martial law, Belfast still bleeding. War seemed to be the motif for 1982, he said. So the band made a decision. They wouldn't retreat into safer, more palatable music. They would confront the world head-on. They would make an album that felt urgent, blunt, dangerous. They would call it War. The Edge described the title as risky. It's not something that's safe, so it could backfire. That was the point. U2 needed to prove they mattered. And to do that, they had to take a risk that might destroy them. Recording began in August 1982 at Windmill Lane Studios in Dublin. Same studio, same producer. Steve Lillywhite returning for a 3rd consecutive album despite his usual rule against it. But this time there were fractures showing. The band worked on early sessions with Irish composer Bill Whelan, creating tracks like The Refugee. Then Lillywhite rejoined. The creative process wasn't smooth. The band was trying to strip away the atmospheric experimentation of October and sharpen their sound into something more confrontational. The Edge pulled back on his signature delay-heavy guitar. Drums needed to sound militant, not ethereal. The songs had to punch, not shimmer. Larry Mullen Jr. resisted using a click track to keep perfect time. He was against the idea. It felt mechanical, restrictive. Producer Lillywhite pushed for it. Tension simmered. Then a chance encounter changed Mullen's mind. He met Andy Newmark, drummer for Sly and the Family Stone, who swore by the click track. Mullen relented. The result was a tighter, more driving rhythm section. But the real warning sign wasn't technical. It was thematic. The band was writing protest songs in 1983. Political rock was considered a relic. Punk was over. New romantic synth-pop dominated MTV. Duran Duran, Culture Club, music that was styled for cameras, not conviction. U2 was swimming against the current, and if they miscalculated, they'd drown. Bono spent his honeymoon in Jamaica in August 1982. Not relaxing, working, he was writing lyrics. One song started as a love letter to his new wife, Ali. But by the time it reached the studio, it had transformed into something else entirely. A song about Lech Wałęsa and Poland's solidarity movement. That song became New Year's Day. Bono later recalled the moment. "We improvise, and the things that came out, I let them come out. I must have been thinking about Lech Wałęsa being interned." Poland's martial law had been imposed in December 1981. Solidarity was banned. Wałęsa arrested. The timing of U2's song about the movement felt urgent, immediate, but the real collision came with Sunday Bloody Sunday. The Edge wrote the guitar riff and early lyrics after an argument with his girlfriend. Depressed, doubting his abilities as a songwriter, he channeled frustration and fear into a piece of music. The original lyrics were explicit. "Don't talk to me about the rights of the IRA, UDA. Too specific. Too sectarian." Bono reworked them, softening the stance while maintaining the emotional core. The song became a nonpartisan cry against violence itself, not for one side or the other, but against the cycle. Still, the band knew the risks. To title a song Sunday Bloody Sunday and perform it in Ireland was to invoke two of the darkest days in Irish history. January 30th, 1972, when British troops killed 13 people in Derry. November 21st, 1920, when British soldiers fired into a Dublin crowd. Even without taking sides, the song could be catastrophically misunderstood. One more element arrived by accident. A local violinist named Steve Wickham approached the Edge at a bus stop one morning. He asked if U2 needed a violin. The Edge invited him to the studio. Wickham recorded his electric violin parts in half a day. His contribution became the haunting final layer of Sunday Bloody Sunday. The song was ready. The album was taking shape. But no one knew if the world was ready for it. Island Records sent a representative to the studio. An unnamed A&R man listened to Sunday Bloody Sunday. He loved it. Then he said, "Can you drop the bloody?" It was a small request, a compromise, a way to soften the blow, to make the song safer, more palatable to radio programmers and cautious listeners. The band refused. This was the moment, the point where U2 chose confrontation over caution. Bono told NME in 1983, "By calling the album War, we're giving people a slap in the face and at the same time getting away from the cozy image a lot of people have of U2. No compromise, no safety net." The album was titled War. The cover featured Peter Rowan, the same boy from the Boy album cover, now older, with a split lip. The imagery was stark, violent, confrontational. The songs addressed nuclear war, seconds, refugees and immigration, the refugee, emotional violence in relationships, red light. The Edge even sang lead vocals on parts of Seconds, a rare departure. Everything about war was designed to provoke. And then came December 1982, the pre-war tour. The test run before the album's release. 21 shows, Glasgow first, then Belfast. Belfast was the real test. The Edge later recalled, "We thought a lot about the song before we played it in Belfast. Bono told the audience that if they didn't like it, then we'd never play it again." Bono stood at the microphone. He couldn't speak all day leading up to the performance. The weight of what they were about to do was overwhelming. He introduced the song. He promised to never play it again if the crowd rejected it. Then they played Sunday Bloody Sunday. The place went wild. Out of 3,000 people, about 3 walked out. The Edge. "I think that says a lot about the audience's trust in us." The gamble paid off. But the album hadn't been released yet. The world hadn't weighed in. U2 had crossed the point of no return. There was no pulling back now. February 28, 1983. War arrived. In the UK, it debuted at number 1, knocking Michael Jackson's Thriller off the top of the charts, U2's first number 1 album. In the US, it entered at number 91, eventually climbing to number 12, their first gold-certified album in America. Commercially, War was a breakthrough. Critically, the reception was fractured. In the United States, reviews were largely positive. Rolling Stone's J.D. Considine praised the album's impact, comparing it favorably to The Clash's London Calling. He highlighted the arrangements, the dynamics, the emotional sweep. But in the UK, resistance was sharp. Gavin Martin in NME dismissed War as another example of rock music's impotence and decay. He called it dated, static, and accused Sunday Bloody Sunday of being a lesser version of Stiff Little Fingers. Dave McCulloch in Sounds was equally harsh, calling the album old-fashioned and excessively overloaded. Steve Lake in Melody Maker wrote, "Too often it sounds like October Part 2. How do you respond to Bono asking, 'How long must we sing this song?' The cynic would say, 'You've touched enough royalties to retire comfortably.'" Mark Cooper in Record Mirror, "U2 is probably the only rock band that still believes it can save the world." The British press treated War as a relic, preachy, earnest, out of step with the slick, detached cool of 1983. The criticism stung, but something else was happening. MTV embraced the album. New Year's Day and Sunday Bloody Sunday were in constant rotation. The videos, stark, intense, emotionally raw, cut through the polished veneer of early 80s pop. And the live performances were becoming legendary. The War Tour consumed 1983. U2 played relentlessly. The shows were intense, physical, cathartic. Bono waved a white flag during Sunday Bloody Sunday, a symbol of surrender and peace. He'd climb scaffolding, scale lighting rigs, and lead audiences in chanting, "No more." The minimalist stage design featured 3 large white flags at the back. Electric fans set them flying at designated moments. Stage fog rolled through. Lighting was stark, dramatic. Willie Williams, the tour's lighting and stage designer, would go on to work with U2 for decades. But the defining moment came on June 5, 1983, Red Rocks Amphitheater, Colorado. Rain poured. The weather was brutal. Only 1/3 of the venue filled. The show was a financial risk that could have bankrupted the tour. But the cameras were rolling. The rain, the torches, the natural beauty of Red Rocks, and Bono waving the white flag through crimson mist created one of the most iconic images in rock history. Rolling Stone later called it one of 50 moments that changed the history of rock and roll. The footage became the concert film U2 Live at Red Rocks, Under a Blood Red Sky. MTV aired it constantly. The accompanying live album, released in November 1983, became a massive success. U2 was no longer a struggling band trying to survive. They had transformed into something else entirely, a force that could fill arenas and command stages. But there were consequences beyond success. Bono introduced Sunday Bloody Sunday night after night with the same phrase, "This is not a rebel song." He had to. Because people kept misunderstanding it. Some thought it glorified violence, others thought it condemned the IRA specifically. The song was nonpartisan, a cry against all violence, but interpretation was messy. Years later, at a 1987 concert in Denver, Bono learned of the Enniskillen bombing in Northern Ireland, an IRA attack that killed civilians, including children and elderly people. He stopped mid-song. Rage and grief poured out. "And let me tell you something," he shouted. "I've had enough of Irish Americans who haven't been back to their country in 20 or 30 years come up to me and talk about the resistance, the revolution back home. And the glory of the revolution, and the glory of dying for the revolution. Fuck the revolution." The performance was captured in the Rattle and Hum film. It was raw, unfiltered, and deeply controversial. After that night, Bono reportedly said the band might never play Sunday Bloody Sunday again. It had been made real, but they kept playing it. Because the song outlived any single moment. It had become bigger than the band. In the years following war, critical opinion began to shift. What British critics in 1983 dismissed as earnest and outdated, later generations recognized as fearless and necessary. David Fricke later wrote that on War, U2 sound like stars, not aspirants, ready for their money shot. Stephen Hayden praised Bono's mastery of the grand symbolic gesture and the album's ability to transform earnestness into power. Pitchfork's Joe Tangari concluded, "The U2 we've known ever since had arrived on War." Musicians began citing the album as an influence. The Edge later inducted The Clash into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, saying, "There is no doubt in my mind that Sunday Bloody Sunday wouldn't and couldn't have been written if not for The Clash." The album's sonic choices, stripped down, militaristic production, martial drums, reduced delay on the Edge's guitar, became a template for countless bands, and audiences never stopped responding. Sunday Bloody Sunday became a centerpiece of U2's live shows, a moment of communal catharsis that transcended any single performance. At Live Aid in 1985, U2's performance cemented their reputation as one of the greatest live acts in the world. By the time the Joshua Tree arrived in 1987, U2 had become a stadium-filling phenomenon. But it all started with War. With the willingness to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to risk everything on the belief that music could still matter. War redefined what a political rock album could be in the 1980s. It arrived at a moment when protest music was considered obsolete. Punk had been sanitized. New Wave was more interested in fashion than fury. MTV prioritized image over ideology. U2 proved that directness and sincerity could coexist with commercial success. That audiences craved music with weight, not just hooks. The album launched U2 into arenas and stadiums, but more importantly, it gave them permission to be ambitious. The Unforgettable Fire in 1984 pushed into atmospheric experimentation with Brian Eno. The Joshua Tree in 1987 became a cultural phenomenon. Achtung Baby in 1991 reinvented them entirely. But every evolution traced back to War, to the moment they chose to engage with the world rather than retreat from it. The album's influence rippled beyond U2. Bands in the alternative and post-punk scenes saw War as proof that you could be direct without being simplistic, that you could address politics without being preachy. The Edge's guitar work, less reliant on delay, more focused on texture and dynamics, became a model for creating space and atmosphere without drowning in effects. Larry Mullen Jr.'s drumming, recorded in a staircase to capture natural echo, set a new standard. Militaristic, driving, danceable. And Bono's vocal delivery, passionate without being overwrought, showed that earnestness could be a strength, not a weakness. War also proved that risk could be rewarded. The decision to title a song Sunday Bloody Sunday and perform it in Belfast could have ended U2's career. Instead, it became their defining moment. The refusal to soften the blow, to make the album safer, to drop the bloody, became the reason War endured. Because audiences don't remember the safe choices. They remember the dangerous ones. War is a study in conviction. It's an album made by a band that had every reason to play it safe and chose not to. After October underperformed, U2 could have softened their sound, chased radio trends, avoided controversy. Instead, they leaned into confrontation. They made an album that dared to be rejected. And that risk changed everything. The lesson of War isn't just about politics or protest. It's about clarity. About the willingness to say what you believe, even if it alienates people, even if critics dismiss it, even if you're swimming against the current. In 1983, earnestness was out of fashion. Sincerity was seen as naive. Protest rock was a relic. U2 didn't care. They believed music could still matter, that songs could still provoke thought, spark conversation, create moments of collective emotion. And they were right. Decades later, war still sounds urgent. Sunday Bloody Sunday still feels necessary. New Year's Day still resonates. Not because the song solved anything. They didn't end wars. They didn't stop violence. But they reminded people that art could engage with the world, that it could refuse to look away. In Bono's words, people have become numb to violence. Watching television, it's hard to tell the difference between fact and fiction. War was U2's refusal to accept that numbness. It was their insistence that music could and should make you feel something. And in the end, that's why it still matters. Because the world hasn't stopped needing songs that refuse to look away. We've reached the end of this story, but your support keeps these stories alive. If this deep dive resonated with you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who loves music history. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. These stories need to be told, and your support makes that possible. Until next time, thanks for listening.